Guten Morgen zusammen. Welcome to another delayed edition of Feedback Freitag. We'll call it Feedback Montag. Apologies again for not getting this back to you last week. Just a lot of stuff going on, a lot of grading of the online and whatnot. But nonetheless, we will look at things now and go over some of the stuff that Sarah and I noticed last week about the work you completed to give you some ideas of things to work on in the future. So a couple of things that started to really pop up now, especially now that you are getting more into actual sentence construction and writing sentences that need to be grammatically correct, right? We're not just looking at individual vocabulary items here and there. We want to see correct sentences with pronouns, your subjects, your verbs, objects, whatever that might be. We're looking for accuracy more often now. So a couple of things to look out for when you are thinking about writing your sentences and writing in German. The first is in terms of pronouns and pronoun usage in German, and fundamentally what a pronoun actually is, right? And because we often find ourselves using some of the more kind of lexical vocabulary around sentence structure and sentence construction. So we might use the word like a pronoun just interchangeably or just use it regularly, right? But what is a pronoun? What are we looking for exactly when we ask you for a pronoun? So pronouns in their essence are nouns that replace the subject or replace another noun in a sentence, right? So if we have a noun like der Computer, so the computer, because of the der Computer, if we replace it with a pronoun, then we can just pronounce it with replace it with the pronoun er, right? Something like die Katze, again, die Katze, we know it's feminine because of die, so we can replace it with the pronoun sie. Or something like das Auto, the car, again, that's a neuter noun, so we can replace it with the pronoun es. So it's fundamentally knowing what those pronouns are, right? And those are the pronouns that you often see in kind of like verb conjugation tables. So ich, du, er, sie, es, wir, ihr, und sie. Those are your pronouns. So at any point in time, you might be using a pronoun to replace an object, replace a subject, replace a noun, or we might be asking you to look at a noun and replace it with the appropriate pronoun. And fundamentally, that's just making sure that you understand the connection between noun and pronoun, between gender and pronoun, and that it makes sense. Now, there's different kinds of pronouns as well. The ones that we often refer to are those personal pronouns. Those are the ones that, again, ich, du, er, sie, es, wir, ihr, sie. Those are pronouns that replace that object, replace that subject, replace that noun with just, who's doing it, right? Is it I? Is it you? Is it he, she, they, we? Those kind of pronouns, right? That's what we often look for. Now, in some of the work that was completed, some of you replaced those pronouns or replaced the object or the subject, that noun, you replaced it with a more of a possessive pronoun. And possessive pronouns are things that are in English like my, yours, his, hers, right? They show possession of something. In German, those are pronouns like mein, dein, sein, ihr, uns, euer, pronouns that we haven't covered yet. So don't worry about using them. We're not going to ask you for them. Stick to those basic pronouns. The ich, du, er, sie, es, wir, ihr, und sie. Stick to those. When we talk about pronouns, that's what we're referring to basically. And as well, one of the things that we often see ourselves make mistakes on then is that, so in English, when we're talking about something else, right, we often just say, well, it, right? We'll talk about, a car, and we'll say, well, it did something, or a house, it. We often use the pronoun, the personal pronoun it, to replace all sorts of nouns, right? In German, you just can't do the same thing. So if you're talking about a noun in German, and you have to then use a personal pronoun to talk about that noun, that personal pronoun has to reflect the gender of that noun. So even though it might seem weird sometimes, like the one that I saw often was talking about eine Stadt, die Stadt, right? When you talk about the city, then later on, you would say sie. Okay, you're not going to say it, you're going to say sie, her, or she, right? So it feels a little bit weird, it looks a little bit weird, but that's just German for you. So that's pronouns. The other thing is just in terms of verb conjugation, and verb conjugation in general. With verbs in German, we have two kinds of verbs, at a basic level at least. You have regular verbs and irregular verbs. Now, regular verbs follow a fairly consistent conjugation pattern and structure. So it's with ich, it has an E on the end. Du, ST, sie, S, T, with wir, AN, with ihr, T, and with Z, kind of the capital letter Z, the formal Z, EN on the end. Okay? So when you're conjugating a regular verb, and regular verbs are just verbs that follow that conjugation pattern, that's what makes them regular. That's how you conjugate your verb, right? So you take the verb, you remove the suffix, you remove the en, you remove whatever the end of the verb is, you left the stem, and then you just add on those endings to the stem of the verb as need be. So those are regular verbs. Now, unfortunately, in German, a lot of the verbs that we use most frequently, and a lot of the verbs that we learn early on in a German course like 101 would be known as irregular verbs. And they're irregular for two reasons. Either the ending is somewhat different in one of those parts. So, for example, ist, right? The verb sein, it's ist. So you would think it's just like t on the end, but in this case, well, it's completely different, basically, right? Ist, ist. There's no rhyme or reason for that based upon the verb itself being sein, but that ending changes. Or in some cases, the stem itself will change, right? So you have something like, again, sein, ich bin, or for something like nehmen, the verb nehmen, to take, it's ich nehme, but then it's du nimmst. So that stem of the verb nehmen completely changes to nimm, and then be nimmt. Then it goes back to be nehmen, nehmt, sie nehmen. So that stem changes, and often the stem changes in both the do and the as, the s form. But nonetheless, you have to, unfortunately, for those kind of things, just memorize what the change is, what makes that verb irregular, and conjugate it accordingly. So I would just encourage you to, when you see verbs that look a little bit different when they're utilized in the textbook, or when we utilize them differently, or when you start to write them, you notice they're a little bit different. Those are just verbs you have to memorize. But again, I mean, to some extent, luckily, because those verbs are so frequently used, you'll at least see them often, and you'll start to pick up on the fact that, okay, yeah, sein is irregular, haben is irregular, nehmen is irregular. I have to look at those verbs and conjugate them a little bit differently. Okay? So that's about it for today. That's already a lot. I've probably been speaking for 7-8 minutes or so. Keep those things in mind as you progress in the course. Again, check out feedback from last week on the Anweise, the tongue controller. Sarah will be grading the Polizei controller today, so look at that as well. And then, yeah, all the best with this week's work. Tschüss.